A very good afternoon and welcome to each one of you who has joined this webinar from different corners of the country. I take the opportunity to welcome Mr. Liby Johnson, who has been kind enough to accept our invitation as a guest speaker in today's webinar. Mr. Johnson is a social development management specialist with more than 25 years of experience in grassroots and policy level work in the realm of livelihood, disaster management, and organizational development. Sir is currently serving as Executive Director of Gram Vikas, which is a development organization that is enabling sustainable and equitable processes to ensure a dignified quality of life for the rural communities. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us today in the webinar as a guest speaker. I now invite the Director of Development Management Institute, Professor Devi Prasad Mishra, to deliver the welcome note. So mute, huh?
Sir, please unmute yourself, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Raz. Good afternoon, everyone. Very warm welcome, Mr. Liby Johnson. I have had the privilege of calling him by his first name. It feels a little odd taking the full name. And it is indeed, we are thankful to you for having agreed to present this seminar today, given our interest and our work in WASH. At DMI, it is of very recent origin. We are still taking the baby steps in this vast field. And we couldn't have thought of a speaker to benefit from more appropriately than you. Not only Gram Vikas, you have inherited a huge reputation and of doing excellent work in this field. You currently you're leading that organization and you're charting new paths, not only introducing corrective measures, but also initiating new experiments that would make WASH a permanent feature of the village community. So we look forward to your lecture. Thank you so much and welcome.
I would now like to invite Mr. Liby Johnson to speak on an issue which is very critical and which is the need of the hour, and without which I think no development program or project can be successful in achieving its goal. That is community participation and the role of Panchayati Raj Institutions in ensuring sustainability of the water supply systems as well as the sanitation facilities. But before I hand over to Sir, just a small information. After Sir delivers his talk, we will have a short question-answer session. So I request all of you to keep your mic and camera off during the talk. Welcome, Sir.
Well, thank you, Professor Raj, and thank you, Professor Devi Prasad Mishra. I haven't said this name in a long time. It's wonderful, and thank you for the opportunity. And hopefully, what I present today, as the director said, based on a lot of the work that Gram Vikas has been doing over several years in Odisha and some parts of Jharkhand. Is the presentation visible?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Sir. It's visible, sir.
Okay. Now you made me host, and there is all these joining requests are popping up and blocking the screen in between. One second. Let me just Okay. So what I would like to speak about in the context of water sanitation and hygiene in rural India, among rural communities, particularly about how community institutions and Gram Panchayats can benefit from sustainable wash, work towards sustainable wash. There are three sections that I would like to deal with, kind of putting together, not necessarily a definition, but putting a context together for what we mean by sustainable water sanitation hygiene in the context of rural India, Eastern India specifically. The issues about community ownership and control over water sanitation hygiene. I'd like to speak about Gram Vikas's experience, and finally a brief about how we can issues and challenges and opportunities with respect to Panchayati Raj institutions. In the context of rural wash, some of the challenges that we've seen over the last many years, Gram Vikas has been working on this since mid-1990s. We've had the Swachh Bharat mission in the last 7-8 years, and then now Jal Jeevan mission. So some of the key issues which are in the form of challenges. One is that the household level sanitation behavior among first generation toilet users, it depends substantially on the certainty of water supply, and this has several ramifications to it, the effort needed, but also a huge gender issue, because it's the women in the household who are responsible for collecting water, bringing water to the household, and if they have a toilet without water supply accessible close by, the effort that women have to make to bring water also increases. We also find that increasingly that use of toilet, even where it happens, does not lead directly to village sanitation. Solid waste accumulation, waterlogging, there are all kinds of issues that come up. Infant and child feces disposal continues to be a problem because these are not habitual toilet users where toilets exist. And that seems to be leading to a new set of problems. The attitude to menstrual health or hygiene has not changed, and that causes substantial issues in the wash space. Water quality. There's been a lot of effort, particularly all of you in Bihar would know Bihar is probably among the largest states that is substantially affected by water quality issues. So there's a lot of effort that is happening around water quality, but probably more interventions, new type of interventions, and building capabilities around water quality needs to be done. In the context of water quality, what we are also increasingly finding is as tap water becomes, or easy access to water, drinking water becomes the norm, user level contamination, bacterial contamination because of poor personal hygiene or inadequate water handling practices. And of course, sustainability of water sources is a key issue. So it's in this context that I'm trying to define based on Gram Vikas's experience. And when we talk about sustainable water sanitation and hygiene, we are essentially talking about how society, people in the society become healthier and better, the nutrition status improves. So WASH by itself is not an end. It probably the more feasible, more practical, more appropriate endpoint is sustained health and nutrition outcomes. And if you look at, let's say, household level toilets or bathing rooms, piped water supply system, the institutional systems that contribute to it and that leads to kind of community managed behavior change, results in first generation WASH interventions. But first generation WASH results, which by itself is not sufficient. What we need is a new set of, or an additional set of, both individual household behaviors and community systems. So like I said, child feces disposal, personal hygiene, drinking water handling, kitchen sanitation, community systems around solid waste management, liquid waste management, water quality surveillance and management, water source sustainability. If only these three come together, the first generation WASH interventions, which will come through the result of investments that have been made or currently being made, but a large chunk of behavioral elements that the individual and the household level, and also additional community systems that are needed in terms of ensuring WASH. So this is broadly what we mean by sustainable WASH. I mean, that it takes care of all aspects of drinking water, all aspects of personnel, household and community, village sanitation and hygiene. and that it can lead to improved health and nutrition outcomes. So this is broadly the schema in which at Gram Vikas, and also if you look at the guidelines issued by the Government of India for the Swachh Bharat mission, the second phase of Swachh Bharat mission, or the Jal Jeevan mission that's currently picking up pace, we see that these aspects are included either directly or kind of indirectly in both these programs. And we have substantial experience of state governments, including Bihar under the Saath Nischay Pariyojana, international agencies like UNICEF and all contributing, and a large number of non-government organizations contributing to parts or substantial whole of the system. So I would suggest that understanding WASH should happen backward from improved health and nutrition outcomes as a starting point, and what is needed to achieve those, and how do we programmatize or take up activities related to that. Moving on to broader experience, more specific experience of Gram Vikas in Odisha. This I'll quickly run through this. We've been working on integrated water and sanitation since 1995 across about 25 districts in Odisha and 2 districts in Jharkhand, out of which about 11 or 12 of them we have continued intensive and in-depth interventions now. About 82,000 households that have directly been supported by Gram Vikas to build water supply and sanitation infrastructure and systems. So when we started in 1995, and I want to go back to this for a moment, because today when we are talking about large flagship programs like Swachh Bharat Mission or Jal Jeevan Mission, we tend to forget that there is a base, there is a primary health element to the discussion on WASH we have, and that's what I referred to earlier. So when Gram Vikas was doing its work in Odisha in the early 1990s, we came across a large number of cases of morbidity caused by waterborne diseases. We came across drudgery that women had to undergo because of the effort that they needed to collect water. Of course, the lack of dignity because they had to defecate and bathe in open. We also found social inequities in the villages that perpetuated or reinforced many of these access issues. And this led to lack. I mean, the result was that poor had lower self-esteem and lower levels of dignity because of the nature of physical quality of life they were living. The approach that Gram Vikas took was, we said that drinking water is an uncontested domain if you look at rural social relations. And when I say uncontested, what basically we mean is that everybody's need for drinking water is more or less the same, irrespective of your caste or your economic status or the location. A person needs 3 or 4 liters of water to drink, a few more liters of water for ablution, and so unlike, let's say, an intervention that works on water for productive uses, where land ownership and other property matters would complicate how a program is taken up. Drinking water, in that sense, everybody can come together, find common agreement on these matters. So what we did was to take drinking water as a carrot and tag sanitation to that, and say that unless you build toilets and use toilets, your drinking water sources will continue to be contaminated. And what is the use of having a piped water supply system or an improved water supply system if your source is going to be continuously contaminated because of poor sanitation behavior, because of open defecation? And we said that this has to be done through building ownership of the community, through participation and their financial stake. Participation, not just passive, but active leadership and decision-making participation. And Gram Vikas developed a set of principles that we call mantra, movement and action and network, for transformation of rural areas. And our work has been built around these 5 principles. The first is that everybody has to be part of it. It's called 100%. Everybody, all or none. Every household in a village that comes forward to do this has to take part. everybody has to build a toilet, everybody has to contribute, everybody will get piped water supply. Every village, every household has to share the cost. While there is societal cost, social cost that needs to be met through government or donor funds, but financial stake building through sharing of cost is important. The community, the people have to take responsibility, take leadership to mobilize local contribution, to generate the consensus, to manage the infrastructure building, and to take care of the operation and maintenance of the infrastructure. And equity in participation, whether it is social equity, gender equity, making sure that everybody gets an equal chance to present their views, be part of decision making, and get benefits. We also realize that institutional financial sustainability in terms of having money with the community to manage, continuously operate and manage the infrastructure was necessary. So the mantra principle, the mantra approach became the base for our intervention. So the components of the Gram Vikas program, every household gets a twin pit, pour flush toilet and a bathing room. The bathing room is important because it was a key element of dignity for women, because they would stop going out for defecation, but they also needed a private space to bathe in. A piped water supply with 3 taps to every family, 1 tap in the kitchen, 1 in the bathroom, and 1 in the toilet. So absence of water would never be a reason for people to not use the toilet. A village committee for the ownership and management of the water sanitation system. We created what's called a village corpus fund, a resource in perpetuity, one-time fund created whose interest income would be used by the village committee for financial assistance to new families to maintain and upgrade the water supply system, and a separate maintenance fund to pay for the regular maintenance and operations of the water supply system. So this is basically these 5 components in the program that we built. Gram Vikas pitched in with community mobilization and capacity building, awareness and sensitization activities, especially targeted at specific user groups, building the VDC, the Village Sanitation Committee, as an institutional platform, building their capability, village-specific measures to motivate on the use of toilets, because each village would be a separate case by itself. Working with children, often in collaboration with schools, to make sure that the behavioral change process starts very early and the awareness kind of is generated at all levels. We also looked at nutrition garden, using the grey water from the bathrooms and the kitchen where they wash their dishes for creating backyard vegetable kitchen gardens that would produce vegetables for use. So these were elements of the mobilization work that Gram Vikas did in these communities. Quickly, some pictures of what these structures are like: the water supply system and the household toilets. Give you a quick context of the work, the places that Gram Vikas has worked in. The nearly 80,000 households that we work with, about 48% are scheduled tribes, 12% are scheduled caste, and 40% belong to other communities. In Odisha's case, substantially in the plain areas. And if you look at geographic diversity in terms of the kind of villages that we work with, nearly 47% are the hilly areas of southern and western Odisha, parts of northern Odisha as well. 14% are what would be characterized as drought-prone areas with either semi-arid or low rainfall regions. 4% are mining areas, and 35% would be regular riverine or plain areas. 51% of the sources of water in these villages come from groundwater, deep bore wells. 36% from, particularly in the hilly areas, from natural springs, mountain springs, and 13% come from shallow dug wells, about 10-meter depth, whereas the bore wells would be anywhere from 60, 70 to 120 meters depth. Similarly, source of energy for pumping, where the water is pumped from the source to the water tank, from where it is distributed through gravity. Electricity is about 55%. Gravity flow in case of the springs, and 9% are solar powered. So that's broadly the diversity in terms of where we work, how we work. In 2019, we went back to about 846 of these villages to understand the status of these water supply systems, and to we were prepared for a certain amount of failure, but we found that only 3% out of the 846, only 29 villages had where the system had failed. In 97% of the villages, built over a period of 20 years, the water and sanitation system was functional when we did the status assessment survey in 2019 2020. So basically the point is that community managed water supply and sanitation systems do work. I mean, they work, and they work over a period of over 2 decades as well. So that's basically the point here. How did we manage to do this? What were if I were to reflect on the key lessons that we learned, we used the habitation as the planning and implementation unit. We did not complicate it by saying revenue village or the Gram Panchayat. We said that if it is to be community managed, the community has to be able to define itself and to relate to each other. I mean, one can't bring in administrative or other externalities into something that is community managed. People have to be comfortable with each other. There, of course, are social and cultural issues that affect the community, but even with those, geographic proximity, living in one nucleated settlement, etc. So the habitation or the hamlet was taken as the planning and implementation unit, and this allowed for everybody to take part directly in building consensus. You did not have to create a representative system of village sending a few people to a panchayat and the panchayat level decision making. So that, I think, is one of the key reasons why we've been successful. Of course, the ownership by the village committee, and this village committee is elected by everybody in the village. All the male and female head of households come. Proportional representation for women and the social groups in the committee, so that everybody is by design included. And also obtaining a written commitment from every household that they will abide by the decisions of the VWC. And this is done at the beginning of the program itself. And their participation and engagement at all levels, whether it is site selection, whether it is deciding on individual components of source, or using traditional knowledge to identify sources, planning of the contribution, how Shramdan will happen, how people will contribute materials, who will contribute cash, and of course monitoring of the construction. So this whole package has to be there for a sustainable system to be built. Just to give you a quick idea of what is the kind of community contribution that we are talking about. This is a case of, let's say, a typical village, a typical hamlet of 50 households. This calculation was done in 2019, when typically the cost of a household level bathing room and toilet is 30,000 rupees, of which 12,000 was available under Swachh Bharat mission, which means 18,000 rupees per household was their own contribution. The cost of a water supply system would be about 22 lakhs. It's not highlighted there. That's the third line for those of you who can see it. And community contribution in our case is anywhere from 15 to 20%. And if we look at the current value, discounted value of the cash flows needed to maintain the water supply system, the operation and maintenance of the water supply system for the next 15 years, we've taken 15 years as kind of the reasonable life of the system. Today, you will need about nearly 10 lakhs. That's the current value of what the community would spend over the next 15 years. And this is spent by the community only. 100% of it comes from the community. So if you look at in today's current value, cost of a piped water supply system for 50 households for the next 15 years is about 31.6 lakhs, of which about 85% of the capital cost comes in as grant support from the government or from various other sources. Community contribution is nearly 13 lakhs there. So if you look at the village as a whole, 42% of the resources, financial resources, this could be in cash or as labor or in kind, needed for setting up a individual household sanitation infrastructure and a village piped water supply system that runs for 15 years is nearly 52 lakhs, and 42% of that is contributed by the community. This figure is important because if you look at urban parts of India, the contribution of a household or of a user community is probably less than 10%. I mean, it's only the cost of construction of their own toilet, because the municipality or the government takes care of the entire responsibility for flushing the sewage, for the sewage treatment plant. I mean, they pay a certain amount as water charges, but if you take the total cost of the system that urban community gets in terms of water and sanitation services of this kind, urban households, urban communities would probably be contributing less than 10% of the cost, whereas poor rural communities in Odisha have demonstrated that they are willing to do this and contribute almost nearly half of the cost of the system. What we found is that people are willing to pay for these services if consistent quality of supply is ensured, that they will continue to get water, they will continue to get these services. If that assurance is there, people are willing to pay. And contribution, it's in the form of labor and locally available materials, small amount of cash, depending on the status of the village, and the time needed for mobilization. It takes 2 or 3 months at the minimum of social mobilization and meetings and discussions, SHG meetings, village meetings with individual families. It takes time to mobilize. And for us also, it's been important because contribution from rural households happen during the lean employment season, which is summer. So you should be ready ready for people to make their labor contribution or their material contribution during that period, which means your construction has to begin sometime in January or February, which means your mobilization has to start in August. So the scheduling and the calendar of this is also important, because if you want people to do contribution in June or July, they will not be ready, because they would be starting their preparation for the Kharif crop and they would not have time. Or in November or December, when they would be busy with harvest, forget all the festivals that come in between. So scheduling of the program is also important, and that we agree on the terms of O&M and the management responsibilities before start of work. What we also found that is in the case of maintenance fund, the money needed to run the system, there's a mix of revenue streams that villages find. Individual household contributions, common property resource incomes, like there's a village pond that they take up scientific fish farming, and the income from the fish goes into the maintenance fund. Village earmark their woodlot, either their gochar land or their plantation, and the income from that comes to the maintenance fund. In some places where there are more than two or more crops of paddy is grown, communities also pay in the form of a percentage of the harvest at the time of the harvest, in terms of a bulk payment. So they make payment twice a year instead of making monthly payment. So there are multiple ways in which communities find their method to make the contribution. So that was a quick kind of summary of what Gram Vikas, the experience of Gram Vikas. And I'll now move to the last bit of my presentation on the role of Panchayati Raj institutions, particularly the Gram Panchayat. Now, what is the role of Gram Panchayats in rural water supply and sanitation? It is a role that is mandated by the Constitution of India. Those of you who are familiar with the 29 subjects that the Constitution of India has earmarked as a mandate for Gram Panchayats, drinking water and sanitation is the 11th or the 12th of that. So
Libby, we have lost you, Libby.
And let's wait for a couple of minutes. I think there's some technical issue at Liby's end. Yeah, Libby's back.
Okay. How long were I disconnected for?
I think 1 minute, not more than that.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
So I was talking about the role of Gram Panchayats, and I'm not sure how much of this was covered before I got disconnected. That it's a role mandated by the Constitution of India that by virtue of being the rural drinking water and sanitation as a service to be provided by the as mandated by the Constitution. The other thing is about women being the primary stakeholders in the sanitation water WASH agenda. Have a great role to play by design. Again, 50% of the elected representatives are women. They have a key role to play in the Gram Sabha. And of course, the convergence of funds and programs, either whether it's Finance Commission grants, whether Jal Jeevan Mission or NREGS. So the whole range of funds and programs that are now responsibility of the Gram Panchayat to plan and execute. So in whichever way you look, Gram Panchayats play a very critical role in the WASH space. Quickly on Jal Jeevan Mission, where Jal Jeevan Mission has clearly said that it's a joint effort of the Gram Panchayat, the community institutions, and the concerned department, which is the PHED or the Rural Water Supply Department. And the Jal Jeevan Mission talks about the Gram Panchayat functioning as a water utility to ensure access, sustained water supply. The department becomes an enabler, technology facilitator, and a mentor in the process. And of course, the cost sharing and operational responsibilities by the user community through institutions answerable to the Gram Panchayat. So how this works out, and different states, of course, Bihar has already put in place the Ward Implementation and Management Committee, the WIMCs that are playing a role at the ward level. And the WIMC is essentially designed as a user institution that's answerable to the Gram Panchayat. So several states are coming up with their own types of approaches, models to that. So what does it take to enable the GP to be a water utility, to be I'm not particularly fond of this water utility thing, because you can't make a local government, a service provider. In that sense, it's the government. So, but how do you make the GP Gram Panchayat to be a water governor or a water service controller? So the Jal Jeevan Mission talks about setting up village water and sanitation committees. In Bihar's case, it would be those WIMCs. How can we make them managerially and technically competent to be the technical service arm of the Gram Panchayat? Train and nurture youth, young men and women in the villages to be the technical cadre. Use the SHG networks, whether it is Jivika or various forms of women's institutions that are available, to engage with the Gram Sabha at the Gram Panchayat level for making sure that demands are raised properly and service assurance is ensured. They can work on timely collection of water charges for the Gram Panchayat. they can be helped, the system can be helped to plan for proper utilization of the Finance Commission grants to ensure this convergence that is needed. Of course, the guidance and support is needed for the for planning and implementation of NREGS from a water security point of view, to kind of. So a lot of the discussions around Gram Panchayats has been around water, but there seems to be less focus on the softer aspects of sanitation and hygiene behavior. But Swachh Bharat Mission 2, of course, has come up with more comprehensive guidelines around solid waste and liquid waste management. So a lot of the schematic focus seems to be around technology and infrastructure. And I think the behavioral mobilization, motivational element continues to be a gap. And this is something that, organizations like the WASH Observatory, field level organizations like Gram Vikas are necessary to kind of address and bridge these gaps. What are the issues when it comes to Gram Panchayats? And this probably is my last slide. What are the issues that come up when we talk about Gram Panchayats? Is, of course, most of it is known to us. I do not want to repeat it, but Gram Panchayat just cannot be the Mukhya in Bihar's case. Sarpanch in most other states, Mukhya in Bihar. It's also not just the ward members or the Panch alone, but the Gram Sabha also. And that seems to be a limitation in the understanding, particularly on the government side, that when they talk about the Gram Panchayat, you directly refer to the Mukhya or the Panchas and not the ward members, not necessarily to the citizen body, or that's a Gram Sabha. There needs to be efforts to ensure proper flow of communication from the GP to the user communities. Of course, making sure that narrow interests do not suppress the agenda of decentralized governance and service delivery, particularly when it comes to water, sanitation, hygiene. And the biggest support I think we can all provide is to make sure that the women and their self-help groups are trained, made capable to be effective service providers, but also demand creators for water supply, sanitation, and hygiene. I'm sorry, this water supply is only mentioned there, but the as I said earlier, when it comes to Gram Panchayats, there seems to be a misplaced but inadequate focus on the other elements of WASH. So that continues to be an issue. And like I said, there is a lot that WASH Observatory can do to address some of these key gaps. I'll stop there for now and would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the very informative talk on community ownership and control of rural WASH, as well as the role of Gram Panchayats in supporting community mobilization. The experiences shared by you about Gram Vikas's interventions in community mobilization, as well as the water and sanitation interventions, were a very valuable learning experience. And I am sure all of us have some very important and significant takeaways after today's talk. Thank you, sir. So now we move over to the question answer session, and any of you who want to ask a question can do so. You can do so by raising your hand as is displayed in the icon below, or you can type the question in the chat box. Suman Kumar Jha, I can see your hand raised. You can ask your question, please.
Yes, ma'am. My question is that what are the key challenges during the implementation of the WASH program in any hamlets area?
So, challenges are across the board, and for each type of intervention, each stage of the intervention, if you look at the whether it is construction of the infrastructure, whether it is mobilizing people, whether it is ensuring that appropriate behaviors continue, the challenges are different. So but if I were to kind of look at some of the common issues, one is, of course, the traditional social relationships in the villages, where society has already defined who should do what and who should speak at what time. Women, of course, do not have a necessary voice. So these are issues that keep cropping up at all stages, whether it is mobilization, whether it is construction, whether it is behavior-related matters, whether it is convergence. Those traditional social factors continue to be a problem, to be a challenge at different points in time. That is one. Second is one of the things that I've experienced is lack of clarity in our communication. What is it that we are trying to do? What is it that an external facilitating agency will do? What is the community or the individual expected to do? Not having sufficient clarity in our communication, not having sufficient clarity in our plan is of course a serious problem, because then that leads to wrong expectations, and of course the expectation achievement mismatch that leads to continuing grievances. I would not think economic status, financial status of a household or a community is a problem. And to me, when somebody says people are poor, therefore they are not willing to do, is a very lazy assessment of the situation. Our experience has been poor people will contribute if they are assured of the quality. And that communication, or the demonstration of that credibility, of that assurance, becomes an important issue. There will be many more, but for sake of time, I would stop at these two key reasons and that one non-reason.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
I now invite Dr. Prabhakar Sinha, sir, to put up his question.
Hi, Libby, how are you? It's always a pleasure to listen to you talking about these issues. As a development partner, I see the scenario as like in Bihar, we have 3 different departments looking after water supply and sanitation issues. RD is there, PRD is there, and PHD is there. You are very well aware of that factor. Then, though we have been able to provide the infrastructure facilities now to an extent in terms of JGM also, there's a different debate on JGM or MGPNY, but it's okay. That's one thing. In sanitation also. But there's hardly any focus on the behavioral aspect and sustainability of the infrastructures. Like if I talk of water supply, though the operational part has been given to the ward member will be the operator and will be getting that money, but the engagement of the community is largely missing. So that's another challenge which I see. Then there's a sort of reluctance with the government system to engage NGOs or CSOs, like in other states it is something like that. And we do not have any such established organization also here in Bihar, because we have not invested over the decades in those organizations, whether it is Sehbhagi or Gram Vikas or CYSD or any other agencies like that. So in such a circumstances, what do you think should be the approach for the state, perhaps which government can adopt? 1, 2, as a UN body, we should be looking for some opportunities, like we have already grabbed one and we have partnered with DMI. So what are the other avenues? So that's the question. Thank you.
Good to see you, sir, as always. See, what you speak about Bihar, the multiple departments, multiple approaches, therefore, and and also let's be frank, Bihar has a huge water quality issue. So you cannot have the same approach across Bihar, whether it's flooding, whether it is arsenic, whether it is fluoride, all kinds of those issues. So Bihar is a complicated state in that sense compared to Orissa, and I don't think Gram Vikas would have been able to do the same kind of work in Bihar that we did in Orissa, given that
Sure, had you been there, you would have been. Well, I'm sure had you been here, you would have been able to. Anyways, yeah.
Yeah. So the point is, and also what you said about non-state actors not being a key element.
Yes.
So I think what we can do, particularly in the context of WASH Observatory, both Suomoto action as well as part of the KRC. I think we need to start calling the spade by its name instead of imagining and telling people that everything is all right. We need to start in a nice way, in a very diplomatic way, pointing out what is missing and not just nitpicking, but being able to say that something else is possible. No, I mean, DMI, part of its summer placement, the internship programs can get the young boys and girls to actually go to villages, stay there for a month, experiment with some of this. So, I mean, one of the reasons when Devi asked me to do this, I happily jumped to do that, is because I see huge potential in Bihar for DMI to play a very direct role, and the WASH Observatory facilitating that. Of course, UNICEF can also will obviously play a wonderful role in supporting this. So I think we just need to stop being complacent or fearful of what the reaction would be. And in the next 3 or 5 years, women in Bihar are going to start demanding better services, and the state will be forced to do that. So how do we prepare for that? And so even if the NGOs don't exist, I mean, Jivika system is fairly strong in many places. So I think the SAGs of Bihar would be, having, to my limited understanding, would be the way the WASH scenario in Bihar will develop, and provided UNICEF and the WASH Observatory and all is able to push it, get the Jivika system to think outside the box, act outside the box. So I'm quite hopeful for Bihar in that sense. And the technical issues would remain, of course, and the investment needed to address the technical glitches would be a key issue. But that said, I think in the women of Bihar would be the future of the WASH space.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, sir. There's one question in the chat box. I'm reading it out, sir, from Mrityunjay Chandra. In JJM, we observe that PRI face O&M problems and can't solve with fund as technical barriers are obstructing their path. What do you suggest?
The experience of Odisha is probably won't be very, very relevant to Bihar for the simple reason that the source and the quality of water and the kind of technology required to ensure regular water supply in Bihar is slightly more complicated. But having said that, I think this whole technical barrier issue is being made into a much bigger problem than it actually is. I think we need to break it down into smaller components. There is a technical capability issue when it comes to plumbing, basic repair at the household level, basic repair of the pipeline. Many of the WIMC installations which are solar pump based, these are not things that require rocket science capability to do regular operation and maintenance. So I think in Odisha's case, I'm saying about 60% of the cases, village level capabilities can be built to do that. In Bihar's case, it's probably about 20-25% of the cases, where there would be single village systems, small compact water supply systems that supply water. Everything in that can be handled locally by the Gram Panchayat, by the WIMC. There is no need for complicated, but we need to address those capacity issues in an ongoing way. Where it is bulk water supply, we need to start differentiating between transmission and distribution. The transmission part, bringing the water from a faraway source to a common point from where it is distributed, would continue to be a departmental issue. Gram Panchayats cannot play anything there. But the last mile distribution is again similar to a single village system where distribution is done locally, the pipelines are local. So I think if we approach the O&M from a broken down component wise element and apply apply the principles of subsidiarity, people do what they are best to do at the level that they can do, I think this O&M problem can easily be resolved. It is a question of visualization of the issue and the solution than what actually exists. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Ravi Shankar, you can ask your question, please.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for bringing Gram Swaraj for their enlightening and very enriching experience. and presentation here. My question is focused on one of the greatest challenges of raising funds and community contributions from the community, particularly in the rural setting. So I am just wondering how much of the 42% community contribution was actually from the individual household level. I can understand there are community properties from which the revenue is generated, which can contribute to that 42%. But as far as individual household communities, the household level is concerned, how much is that? If you can give some idea. And there is another one aspect, how you did that. That's the main question.
So I think in about 75% of the cases, 42% is from individual households. It's only in about a quarter of the cases where they have additional sources of income. Even in such cases, individual contribution would way more than 50% of the total financial transaction. So individual contributions are substantially the mainstay. And all of it is not in cash. The maintenance fund, which is the annual recurring payments needed to keep the system, it is in cash. But the capital cost contribution is substantially in labor and kind and local materials, bricks, stone, sand, depending on the location. And of course, unskilled labor and in many cases, skilled labor as well. That's the profile of the community contribution that we've been able to generate. Individual contributions is the biggest part, substantially the biggest part. Non-individual contributions, common fund, etc., are a small component. How we were able to do that, I think, Ravi Shankar, I'll have to go back to my presentation once again. But the basic premise is this, that people need a service and people are willing to pay for a service where they know that the control is in their hands and that the service quality is assured. I think that is the one sentence I would stop at. And this applies across India. I've seen it happen in Kerala. I've seen it happen in Karnataka. It's now happening in Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. It's happened in Uttarakhand. It's happened in Darjeeling. It is happening in Bihar. So if people are assured of that they will get what they are paying for, they will pay. And that's what the private sector has proven time and again across in this country.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Abhinav Kumar, you can ask your question.
Good afternoon, sir. So as we discussed about in this session that importance of quality of water, but the ground reality which I can observe is that the water which is supplied under this Sat Nishchay scheme to the village households, initially it is clean and quality is maintained, but over the time with ruptured pipes and that dirty tanks, I don't think the quality can be maintained for a long time. In fact, in many areas, today only we can see that pipes are ruptured and the dirty water is getting inside the pipelines. So, sir, how a community can be motivated to maintain these, or how, sir, this is taken care of?
So, Abhinav, if this happens in my own house or your own house, how will you do it? You will clean the tank. You will repair the pipeline. Why
yes,
do you?
Sir.
So why is the community not doing it?
Sir, I guess
because they don't have the control.
Yes, sir. So
you give them the control. People have to drink the water, and people have control over. I mean, people want to drink good water. You give them control over that, they will do it. It's as simple as that.
Sir, but it's not being done in our area or your area.
What is the problem? Is it people's unwillingness, or are people not being allowed to do it?
Sir, I think people are not being allowed to do it.
Then what do? Then somebody has to allow them to do it.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. There's one last question in the chat box by Abhishek Chaudhary. What is your take on retrofitting, as SBM2 focuses on retrofitting but provides no specific funds for the same? How do you suggest we go ahead with it, as the earlier phase has many loopholes related to the safe sanitation technology, which is leading to dysfunctionality of toilets?
So, Abhishek, there is no sure-shot solution to that, and we ourselves have been struggling with it now, because a lot of the villages that we work now, People already have used up their 12,000 rupee subsidy to build a substandard toilet that doesn't work. But there are two elements in this that I think are promising. One is Swachh Bharat mission, and the large communication campaign around it has led to greater sensitivity and understanding among people about the need for a toilet. So we will soon come to a stage where people will build their own toilets, like it happened in urban parts of India some time ago. So not probably, some places it may take longer, some places it may be faster, but people will start looking at toilet for what it is. It is a private good. It's something that each citizen would need and each citizen would have to build. So that Swachh Bharat mission has definitely created the momentum for that kind of a transition to happen. Second is Jal Jeevan mission itself, that if water comes to the premises and women want toilets, there will now be very few excuses for them not to build a toilet. So retrofitting in many ways will happen not because government or NGOs or any of us outsiders are wanting to do it. It will happen because people would want toilets. And I'm already seeing this change across communities. It will happen faster in some places. It will be slow in many places. But as interested parties, a Gram Vikas, a WASH Observatory, or a UNICEF can actually do a lot to accelerate this process of further demand creation and finding, kind of innovative ways in which you help people do that. So just to quickly, in Gram Vikas, what we've now done is we've created a cadre of young people, training them to do measurement and estimation. So they are available now to go to a household and say, okay, this Swachh Bharat mission toilet of yours is not functional. In order to make it functional without breaking it down, what is the kind of retrofitting to be done? So if we are able, so now what we are saying is we are able to tell the household ki your toilet will need 6,000 rupees to make it functional for this, this, and this. That is then the next step. The next step of that would be then we start engaging with the community saying, okay, can you find the bricks needed, or there'll be some things that has to be bought from outside which will need cash, but some things they can use an existing resource and do that. So this retrofitting will soon become kind of a norm. And I'm sure a lot of private sector service providers will jump in now to retrofit unusable toilets where there is no junction chamber, where there is no pit, etc. So I'm hopeful that in the next 3 to 5 years, rural sanitation service providing industry will come up in many parts. Already, sludge removal systems, those septic tank clearing systems are coming up everywhere across India in villages. So retrofitting will soon become a market-driven activity is what I expect to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for taking all the questions and giving such convincing replies. I would now invite Coordinator WASH Observatory, Professor Gaurav Mishra, to deliver the vote of thanks.
I hope we do not have any other questions, Dr. Raj?
No, sir. That was all.
Right. Thank you so much. Right. I think it has been a very insightful session, and we got to know many things related to the challenges, the implementing agencies are facing with respect to the sanitation issues. And on behalf of DMI, I extend a really hearty vote of thanks to our guest speaker, Mr. Liby Johnson, who has spared time from his busiest schedule for this webinar. And we had the opportunity to hear his thoughts, and I think it is surely going to encourage everyone who is working or aspiring to work in the area of sanitation and hygiene. And they will think about the challenges and find workable solutions. And for materializing this webinar, we have been fortunate enough to have a backend team of our WASH Observatory. And I'm short of words for their involvement and their willingness to take on completion of tasks maybe beyond their comfort zone. They have been of great support in the organization of event. Thank you so much, WASH team. I extend my thanks to all the faculty members, staff members of DMI for their enormous cooperation. And a special mention to our respected director, Professor Devi Prasad Mishra, for being the catalyst and the supporting pillar for this particular webinar. Thank you so much, sir. I also like to thank all the participants of the webinar. I'm sure you all had an enriching learning experience, and we look forward to conducting such webinars in future, and we hope that you will find time to participate in future too. So thank you so much. And not the least, I would also like to thank everyone who has worked behind the scene to make this webinar happen. Thank you, everyone. And I look forward to seeing you maybe in other webinars. And that's all from my side. Dr. Raj, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Liby Johnson, sir. Thank you.